Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we're Masechtas Yevamot daf Yud Gimel. We're going to begin on Yud Gimel Amud Al, 5 lines from the top with 2 dots. Ketzad Potros Sorsein V'chulu. So we mentioned in our Mishnah that when it comes to, for example, Ervas Bito, so you have 2 brothers, Reuven and Shimon. Reuven has a daughter, Rachel, and Rachel decides to marry this man's brother, which is allowed. You can marry one's uncle. And this man had also a second wife, which is a tzara co-wife. So the din is, as we saw in our Mishnah, that if this brother dies, they're childless, obviously Reuven will not be able to do yibum on his own daughter, that's Ervas Bito, but because of that, also the tzara, who he's not really related to, is also, we don't do chalitza, we don't do yibum. And the question is, what if they had a third brother? So let's say they had Levi. So Levi actually could have done yibum in this situation to one of those 2 women because he wasn't related to them. What happens if Levi dies? And Levi had also another wife, a different wife, other than these 2. So still, he would not be able to, going back to Reuven, do yibum or chalitza with Levi's wife. Again, Levi died, because this is called not just the tzara, but tzara. And it continues in many, many levels that it patters chalitza and yibum because of the original relationship of Ervas Bito. So we're asked, Midhamili, how do we know that we just extend it this far? So I'm Rabbi Yehuda Demerkrol with Sror. The fact that the pasuk says Litzror is Hatar Rivsa Tsaras Harbe. It's coming to include many tsaras, not just the co-wife of the original case, but even again, if a third brother is in the picture and does yibum, which he's allowed because he's not related to Rachel, it says again, he's an uncle, so that is actually allowed. But again, if Levi dies, even if he had, let's say, a few other wives, they would be tsara, and they would also, we would not do yibum. So again, it's based on that word. So Rabashi Omer, he says, Rabashi says, Svarhi. Actually, you don't need a pasuk, it's just logical. Tsara my taima sira. Why do we say that the tsara in the regular situation, because it's a co-wife to Reuven's daughter, so you don't do yibum with her? The reason is because Dimkoim Erva Kaima, because she is linked to the Erva, to the daughter. So so we can still say the same thing, even if they're once removed, there still is this connection, this link to the daughter. Ketzad. So we said if they died, Hain, etc. So the Mishnah said, let's just go, since it was over 10 blot ago, let's just see the language of the Mishnah on Daf Beis and Beis. So the Mishnah concluded and said, Imesu, Ketzad Imesu Sirasein Mutaros. What does it mean if, let's say, the daughter dies, that the tzara is mutar? So again, the whole reason why you can't marry the tzara is because of the daughter. But if the daughter died, so she's not in the picture anymore. So it says, Haisa Bito Nesuas Achiv. So your daughter's married to your brother, for example. And V'lo Isha Cheres, and your brother has another wife. And then Mesa Bito, and let's say your daughter died, so and then afterwards your brother died. So in that case, Sarasa Muteris. So you're allowed to do yibum on her because the whole issue was only in a situation where your daughter was still alive when your brother died. However, in this situation, since your daughter died first, so therefore this tzara is no longer linked to you in any way. Because at the time of the brother's death, your daughter had already died. So therefore, you still could do yibum with her. Fine. So let's, again, with that understanding, let's see the Gemara here. V'afil kanas, even if the brother married the tzara, ulbasov giresh, and then at the end divorced the bas, the daughter. In other words, let's say what we're talking about is that they were both in the picture, that Sarah was actually married, and then afterwards he divorced the daughter, so same din would apply, which means since you disconnected yourself from the bas in this way by divorcing her, the din would still be the same, that Reuven would be able to marry the tzara. Or minhu, is that true? Gimel achin. Let's say a situation you have three brothers. Shnai mehen nesuin beis achiyos. So let's say Reuven, Shimon, Levi. So Reuven and Shimon married two sisters. Ve'echad nasi nachrius, and one of the brothers married just another woman. So you had two brothers that married two sisters, and then the third one is just regular. So girish echad mibali achayos ishto umeis hanosoi. Okay, let's take this one step at a time. So girish echad mibali achayos. Let's say one of the brothers who was married to one of these sisters divorced her. So he divorced his wife. Umeis hanasui nachrius, and then the other brother died, the one who was just married to this regular woman. So now his wife, who is a nachrius, who's not related to these other two sisters. So the question is, what's the din? Is he allowed to do yibum? So the answer is, yeah, v'kansa. So they marry. Hamigaresh umes. So the one who divorced, he ends up marrying this woman, umes, and then now the brother dies. So now again, what happened was that this girl who was a nachris got married to this first brother who had divorced one of his wives, who had a sister. Let's say Reuven and Shimon again. So Reuven then dies. So the question is, what's the status of Reuven's wives as far as Yibum? So Zuhi Sha'amru, Shimeso Nisgarshu Surasen Mutaros. So he said in that situation, the Tsaros are mutter. Now Taima, the Giresh, the only reason why is because it was the divorce V'achach Kanas, and only afterwards he married. Of a Kanas V'achach Giresh Lo. If he would first marry, the brother would have married the Tsara and then divorced, then we would say that that's not the din, that the Tsara is Aser. So it's a stira. So Rav Yirmiyah Tavra. You're right, it's a broken thought. Misha Shanazu, Lo Shanazu. You can't, one who learns one can't learn the other. You're right, they contradict each other. Hai Tana, and our Tana of our Mishnah, Savar Misa Mapelas. He says that it's the death which causes the connection. So as long as your brother was, if your brother was alive, even, and then you did the divorce or whatnot, so, or let's say the boss dies, but at that point, when later on the brother dies, it's the misa which causes the falling. So if there was no erev at that time, then that's why the tsar could potentially be mutter. According to this other Tana, he says no, it's the original marriage that is what causes it. So therefore, even though it may be true that at the time of the death of the brother, the woman was no longer in the picture, still he would say that the tsar is aser. So again, perhaps we can distinguish the two situations, whether you hold that we look at whether this woman could do yibum, is she connected in any way at the time of her husband's death, or even at the beginning of the marriage. Really can be one Tana, but it's coming to say that one is a davar pasha, but even this other situation. So says Rashi, Zudamas Nisin Dahacha. The Kanas L'B'Sav Girish Materes. So this case is one situation where the brother married the tzara and then divorced the bas. Says Rashi, Kedetani Umesa Bito O Nisgarsha, you divorced her. The Ein Sarach Loy Merzu. You don't even need to mention this other case of the Gimel Achen Shigirish L'B'Sav Kanas, where you have three brothers where they divorced and only afterwards that you did the marriage. So in that situation, it's like it's a davar pashut. Then certainly in that situation, it's mutter. So it's not totally on a machlokas whether or not it's nesuna rishonim apil. No, really it's misa mapelas, and therefore she's always going to be a mutter. And therefore we're talking about not only in a situation in which you divorced her and then you married, but even the situation where you married the tsar first and then you divorced, and therefore there was this more of a link between the two. So you think that would asa the tsar? No, even in that case, she's mutter. So now let's go back to the very beginning of our Masechta on Daf Beis Mud Beis. The very end of our Mishnah says, anyone who's able to do miyan but doesn't do miyan, sarasa chaletzas v'omis yevemes. So then the co-wife has to do chalitza. So what is that? So Rashi says over there, let's say, for example, the Arab is a katana, and therefore she could have done miyun. So again, let's say we're talking about two women, but one of the women who's an Arab happens to be a katana, which is kedushi de rabbanan. She could have walked out of this marriage by doing miyun. So Rashi says over there, v'lomi aina, but she didn't do miyun, the katana, umeis achav, and the brother died. Now, hoyel v'kedushaha enu el rabbanan, and since the whole kedusha is only the rabbanan, v'zikas nefilasam the rabbanan, enu pateres sarasim in a chalitza l'ziyav asura. Even though she's an ereva, but she's not really an ereva midaraisa because it's not a marriage midaraisa. It's only midarabanan. So therefore, because of that, we require the tzara to at least do chalitza. So says the Gemara, utima'in hashta v'tisyavim. So why don't we just say, let her do miyah now, and then let the tzara actually do yibum? What's the whole problem? Oh, she's refusing. Have her do miyun, and then she can do yibum. So lema masayle Rabbi Isha. Rabbi Isha mamenis lemamaro v'ena mamenis lezikaso. That is a mouthful. Mamenis lemamaro, which means you can do miyun on kedushi maimer. No, and if you do miyun on maimer, which is a kedushi de rabbanan, so you don't need a get for the mimer in that situation, and she goes back to the status of being zokuk, so that tzara is still aser. Va'enu mamenes l'zikasai, but you don't do miyun on the zika. So in other words, the only time maybe miyun is allowed is only when the link is a small connection, a small zika, in which it's only a durabanan level. So you could do mimer on that. However, we're not going to allow miyun on a situation where she's already zokuk. Once she has a connection, we may not allow her to do miyun anymore. And therefore, that's the reason why we say, oh, let her just do miyun now, afterwards. No, you can't do miyun anymore, and that's not allowed. It says Rashi, to be able to remove the original marriage, to remove the original zika, that much we're not going to allow, because in this situation, because there's a zika, so maybe you can't do miyun. So maybe that's a raya, because otherwise, why is we telling the tzara just do chalitza, have the katana do miyun, and then she could do yibum. Lo tsaras ereva shani. In this situation, because it's a tsaras ereva, it's a different situation. Says Rashi, the Rabbanan Gazru, the Rabban made a decree, Shalot Tima'in liyavume tsarasa, that we're not going to allow you to do this. The Lul Zalzi b'tsaras ereva dilma asil mishri. We don't want to be mazalzel the tsara of an ereva, because you may end up just mottering her completely. Okay, so if we start being lenient and allow these different things, then a person may just think it's completely allowed to marry a tzara in this situation. There's no din of an iser tzara, and therefore, because of that, we only matir chalitza. So that is how we understand that. Okay, the Tani Rami Bar Yecheskel mi aina babal. If, let's say, a person did miyan for her husband that she was married to, and the husband obviously was alive, so muteris la'aviv. In that situation, she's mutter to the father-in-law. Mi'ayna beyavam. If, let's say, her husband had already died, and therefore she does miyun on the yavam, in that situation, asur la'aviv. Alma mishas nefila niris kekalaso. At the time of the nefila, she appears as a daughter-in-law. Hachanami mishas nefila niris ketseres bito. So therefore, because of that, again, we take these extra precautions, and we don't want her just to do miyun on the yavam, because otherwise we could potentially have this issue of thinking that in fact that Sarah is completely mutter even without her doing this. Okay, next Mishnah. Shesha rayos chamuros me'elu. Even though we mentioned 15, now on our second Mishnah, there's actually 6 arayos which are even more chamor than those. Memnei shenesuos lacherim, because she was married to others, sarasein mutaros. The tsar is mutter. Now, what does this mean? So it says Rashi. So these are more strict. When she's married to others, and she's not able to marry because of that a brother from the father side, on the paternal side. So she cannot marry the paternal brother. So because she cannot marry the paternal brother in these certain circumstances, which we'll see in a second, therefore the tsar is completely mutter, which again is our Mishnah before said the tsar is mutter, but certainly these, in which she can't even marry the paternal brother. So one case is imo, his mother. What does that mean? She's not able to marry the brother of this one, who is paternal, sharihi lo eshes ha'av, because she is your father's wife. Okay, and then it continues. V'chein ve'eshes aviv, your father's wife. Achos aviv, your father's brother, your father's sibling. The achaiso mi aviv, and a sister from your father's side. Ve'eshes achi aviv, again it's all paternal. Your father's brother's wife, the Eshes Achiv Mi'aviv, and your paternal brother's wife. Fine. So all these different cases, we are exceedingly, is even more chomer, but the Soresam are mutter. Now we have everything we've learned up until now is actually only the Shita Beis Hillel. There's Beis Shammai Matir and Hatzaras La'achim, Beis Hillel Oisrim. Beis Shammai actually disagrees, as Rashi says. He doesn't use the drush of Litzror, and therefore he actually holds that in the event of, let's say, Ervas Bito, one of the 15 cases of our previous Mishnah, so obviously, again, Reuven would not marry his daughter, but the Tzara he could still marry. So that's a fascinating thought. And therefore, Choltzu, let's say one of these Tzaras actually did Chalitza, one of their brothers. So Beis Shammai Poislim in the kahuna. Beis Shammai say that's actually a valid chalitza because she is zokuk. You have to do chalitza to this tzara. I don't care that her co-wife was your brother's daughter. It doesn't make any difference. Still, you have to do chalitza, and therefore it's a valid enough chalitza that now she can no longer marry a kohen. Beis Hillel machshirin. Beis Hillel says it's okay because the chalitza, as Rashi says, is chalitzas and shalot tzarech. It's nothing. Because we saw in our Mishnah previously that the tzar is potter. There's no yibum and there's no chalitza either. So if they do chalitza, it really had no meaning, and therefore she's still kosher to a kohen, which again is very fascinating. So what happens if this woman taka marries a kohen, right? So you can understand that we could have some issues as far as whether or not she is proper in having this relationship, which again could cause problems in all the future marriages. This Yevamot, let's say Yibum was done, so Beis Shammai machshirin, Beis Hillel poislin. So Beis Shammai says machshirin oisen lekohanim, she's kosher to a kohen. Imnis almanu miyavam tehem. If let's say Yibum is done from if she becomes an almana, if let's say she dies because a woman whose husband died she's an almana is mutter to kohen. However, Beis Hillel poislin. Why? Because the fact that she had bia be'isser, she was not supposed to do so by having yibum, right? So because of that, she becomes posel and she becomes like a zoina, and a zona is aser de kahuna. Now here is one of the most powerful lines maybe in all of Shas. Afal pi she'elu oisrin ve'elu matirin, elu paisan ve'elu machshirin, Lo nimnu beis Shammai melisa noshim beis Hillel v'lo beis Hillel beis Shammai. Even though they had different opinions and they argued, they did not refrain from marrying into each other's families. And if it was that a particular situation would arise, they would just inform everyone. It says Rashi, they were able to communicate their issues and be able to see where they disagreed. They disagreed, but the areas where they agreed, so they were able to remain connected, and that wasn't an issue. Kol taharos v'hatumos shahayu elu mataharim ve'elu matamin. They had certain things in which they would borrow vessels from each other, but they had different dinim. Certain Beis Shammai myself would argue is that Tami is a tahar, but they would still lend each other things out. Ve'elu matamin lo nimnu eisen taharis elu al galbi elu. And again, if there was any kli that may have been in question, so then they wouldn't lend it out. But normally, they would lend things out. So it didn't allow their arguments to get the best of them, which clearly shows their machlokas was l'shem shemayim. Omer Reb Shimon ben Pazi. So my time in the Beis Shammai. What is this whole reasoning of Beis Shammai? Why does Beis Shammai go mamish against the very grain of everything we've been learning about in our Mishnah? Now it says that this woman who's at Sarah, she's the chutza, she's the second one, she should not go to an ish zar. She has no right to just marry whoever she wants if her husband dies, even though that Sarah, the co-wife was this man's daughter. Okay, fine, Reuben's not going to marry her, but that Sarah should not go to an ish zar, to some stranger. Rather, she should do yibum. Chutzam achla deika panimis. When they're talking about there's someone who is related, there's someone on the outside, someone who's related. That again, it means that she should not go and marry someone else because there is a zika even in this situation. Beis Hillel, how does he do this? What does he do with this pasuk? So Boilu will say that this pasuk is coming to tell us the following. It's coming to tell us the following din. Look at Rabbi Yehuda Marab. Yom Rabbi Yehuda Marab, B'nayin Shin Kedushin Taifsin B'Yavama. How do we know that a Kedushin is not Taifis to a Yevama? Namely, if someone who has a Zika and she's supposed to marry this guy's brother, and someone else comes up and gives her Kedushin, that Kedushin has no validity because she has a legal connection to the brother. If some strange person, a person who's not related or not connected, gives her kedushin, nothing. So that's what this is coming to teach us when it comes to this woman. So Beis Shammai miksiv l'chutz chutza ksiv, and therefore he says it's talking about the tzara. Beis Hillel kivan d'chsiv chutza command d'chsiv l'chutz dami. It's like the same thing. The Sangim nechemi oimer. And then we have the letter lamed as a prefix. We put sometimes the letter hey at the end instead of the lamed. So therefore, it's not necessarily a raya either way. In other words, it doesn't show that he's wrong. Elim elima machanoim machanaima. Mitzrayim. So we see that, again, sometimes there's an added hey, but it's not necessarily the hey or not the hey is coming to exclude any drushes. And furthermore, we keep going. Sayama, Yerushalayim, Midbara. Fine. How does he know this din that some person off the street can't just marry someone who has a zika? Mil ish zar nafka. Because it says Ishzar. You're right. So the Ishzar, that is what it comes to teach us. So Chutza Lamali, Marabas Arusa, it's coming to even include an Arusa. What is that referring to? Which is question 12. Ma'loim de Beis Hillel, Mechutza, de Lom du Beis Shammai, Mishum de Tzoras Muteras. So Rashi says, She'imnis Armula min Erison. Let's say she becomes a widow, or the man dies, but she only had kedushin. She didn't do nesuin. Sricha liavim kenesua. She still is zakuk. Even the rusa has to do yibum. Even though she hasn't actually consummated the marriage with this man and he died before that, still there's a zika. Okay, that's what it's come to teach. That was question 12. The idach mechutza hachutza. The idach chutza chutza lo mashmahu. They don't learn out from the extra drasha, the extra letter. Rava Omer. So that's one answer. What was the question? The question is, what's the reason of Beis Shammai that again allows you to marry the tzara? So one is based on the pasuk. Rava says a different shot. The reason Tamai de Beis Shammai the ein iser chal al iser. An iser is not chal on another iser. What does that mean? So the point that so you have Eishas Ach, right? We have this brother, your brother's wife, and we allow it, right? We allow it, b'makom mitzvah. So when in a situation where you have the tzara, so we're not going to say that that extra issue is going to answer you to the tzara. I can understand if that's the situation where first the brother who died did the marriage, and then only afterwards the other brother married. Well, also iser achos isha, the iser of achos isha, your wife's sister, should not come. V'chayala iser eishas ach. It's not going to come and pile onto eishas ach. Once we already see that eishas ach has been released, so therefore we're not going to make a distinction, even though it's isha, achos isha, your wife's sister. So in this situation, that came first. Okay. Weiter. So Beis Shammai says it's a real chalitza, and therefore because of that, she's possible kahunas. Pshita, obviously, because it's real. So Zafukin Rav Yochanan ben Nuri, the Omer boy nesakin lehem lotzaro shehu choltzo isolomis Yevamot. Kamash Malan the Beis Hillel machshirin. So let's go in masakin when it comes to the tsaras that we should do chalitza and not do yibum. On this, they said that Kamash Malan the Beis Hillel is machshirin. As we said, that he will allow yibum to take place. Says Rashi, Kivan de Beis Shammai zekukas l'yavam pshitim choltzim sulos. Right. After all we said, Beis Hillel Kivan de patulahu mesikas yibum im choltzuk sheres l'kuhuna d'lav chalitzahi. It's nothing. So he said, Haraya shoy choltzos. Whenever you have an araya, we should do chalitza. Kivan de bo chalitza subsula poiselas. If you'll Beis Hillel. So the chiddush is in Beis Hillel. So let's say, it was not a chalitza. Yeah, but maybe we'll have her do chalitza. Kamash Beis Hillel feel to kanta the rabbanan leisu v'tzaras delichotzu. We're not going to say, let's do the chalitza, just do it anyway. No, we're not going to have them do chalitza. It doesn't mean anything. And if they do it, it's shulul tzarch, and therefore she'll still be kosher. Kamash the Beis Hillel machshirin l'kahuna, that she can still marry a kohen. Nisyama Beis Hillel poislin sasulamali. Right? We again, obviously, Beis Hillel will say that that's a problem because it was not a proper bia, because she shouldn't have married him, and therefore she's like a zayin and they're puzzle. So I did a tanachol so tanam in nisyamu tanan hasam. Megillah nikros bechad aser shnei masim shlosh aser rabba aser v'chamish aser l'pachlis l'yoser. So when it comes to Mikra Megillah, it's read on either days 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, not more or not less. The Gemara in the beginning of Masechtas Megillah talks about that. Normally, Reish Lakish Rav Yochanan Ikri Kan Lutis Gaidu Lusaso Gudos Agudois. How can we allow people to read the Megillah all these different times if it's a kfar, it's a Mekuvas Chaimim Yos Mishum and Nun? It looks like there's all these different mitzvahs going on, and there's no unity. So hi lotis goidedu legufe. Lotis goidedu is actually coming to tell you the thing itself. It means a person should not make a chabura on for a dead body. That's what it's referring to. It's not talking about agudos. It's talking about stam. A person's mace died, not supposed to hurt yourself. Im kain lemakro lo ti goidedu, my tis goidedu shma mino lohachi good asa, right? It's coming to tell us that. I have kuli hachi to asa. Maybe it's only coming to tell us this other thing. So im kain lemakro lo ti godu, my lo tis goidedu shma mino tarti. So it comes to talk about the mace, but in addition to that, it's also talking about in general that you're not allowed to make different groups. So adkan lo shanisa until now you didn't learn. So we have another problem because we find that when it comes to the din of Erev Pesach, there's some people that do work and some people don't do work. So isura. What does that mean? Says Rashi. The Asur Rabban Livnei Beisar, that the people, the Rabbanan Asur the 14th, the Ibol Mikra B'Chamesar L'Matzu, that they're not allowed to read on the 15th. The Chen B'nei Tesvav Yadal B'Dami L'Shtei Toidos. The problem is not if this is your minig. This is referring to the issue on Mikra Megillah. The L'Chari should be. How is that acceptable? Because if you are allowed to do it on the 14th, it means you can't do it on the 15th. So Mamash looks like there's two different Torahs. So Diyom Rav Shimon Bar Abba, Rav Yochanan, L'Kaimis Miyapurim B'Zmanehem, Zmanim Harbe Tiknolehem, Chachamim V'at Amrit Limin Haga. How could you bring a Rai? Oh yeah, we see this also by Pesach. What do you mean by Pesach? It's just a minhag, right? But over here, it's mamash. It says it's aser. But again, we do have support in psukim that allow it because it says bismanehem. The question is why? Is that an issue of lutis gaidu? So where it says v'hasam surahavi. The truth is over there, it's not comparable to two Torahs. It says Rashi the haroya ezeh. Okay, why not? It's not. There's no iser. But non beishamai or yisur beisil matirin. Right? We see there's a machlokas beis Shammai and beis Hillel, right? About malacha. So Amrlei Hasam Harai Amalacha Hudaleslei. Maybe the whole reason is because person will say, okay, they just don't have malacha to do. It's not necessarily that a person will derive anything from that. So look at Rashi. V'hadid Tani Hasam B'layla. B'leil b'dikas chametz, the night of b'dikas chametz, beis Shammai oisum esil matir and lasos malacha. V'ikadi avdik beis Hillel, v'ikadi avdik beis Shammai. V'arhein ka'agudo. So it looks like it's in different groups. So he said, no, it's not comparable because if, let's say, when it comes to doing malacha on Erev Pesach, you can just say, okay, the person doesn't have any work to do. It doesn't necessarily mean agudos. But our mission itself, we have this issue of what is going to do. So me sabrit also beis Shammai k'divreihem, lo also beis Shammai k'divreihem. So it doesn't mean that we actually held like them. It says Rashi quoting Gemara Masechtas Eruvin, Yotzes Baskal v'Yom Halacha beis Hillel. So okay, fine, that's what they say, but l'maisa we only hold like beis Hillel. Rabbi Yochanan asu v'asu. No, they actually did like the Shita Beis Shammai. The question is, that's a machlokas, and therefore it's an issue of agudos. V'upluted Rabbi Shmuel. The Rabbi Omer lo asu Beis Shammai k'divreihem, u'Shmuel Omer asu v'asu. So one opinion says that they did not do, and they went like according to their own reasoning. Shmuel says the asu v'asu. They actually did in accordance to their own shitas, which again seemingly is an issue of what this guy to do, whether or not one is allowed to do that, making into groups. Okay, we're going to stop there. Let's see a couple of questions. So we saw question 12, which was Ma loimdin beis Hillel mechutza diom de beis Shammai misham datzaros mataros. That even when it comes to an arusa whose husband died, that the din is that you do yibum. Question 13. Mehem beis atamim. What are the two reasons? Yesh loimer b'mashi ein chash. There's no concern of lotus godu in bahad the chlokim beis Shammai beis Hillel imutu lasos malacha b'leil yudal d'nisan. Chutz b'divrei Rabbi the havi lekishtei mekaymis, which we didn't get to yet. So question 13 is haro imalachu delay slay. People just say, he doesn't have any work to do And a second answer we're going to see on tomorrow's daf. Question okay, nothing on TA. TB. Laman di omer will also be Shami Kedevarehen. Madua his nagid Rashem Gamliel was sakan the whole Yisrael Shahitzoris Erev Achol so Yisrael was Yisrael was Shuk L'Divyakol. Adkan.